Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Media Connect 2024. I am your host and your media cartographer, Evan Shapiro. Thanks for coming back. This is going to be a great panel and a really timely topic, as timely as today's news. Fast Track Measuring Fast Success in 2024. Again, I'm moderating. We've got a great slate of panelists. A little paperwork first. The first person to name correctly the music and the act that was just playing as we were walking on stage and is here at the end of the panel, crucially, big element there, will win a $50 gift card from Amazon, courtesy of Streaming Media Connect and Steve Nathans Kelly. Secondarily, if you come to 2 or more panels or sessions this week at Streaming Media Connect 2024, you are automatically eligible to win a really cool AI-powered 4K PTZ streaming camera from Ozbot. It's a really cool piece of tech. I don't know how you're automatically entered, but you will. You'll get emailed after if you won. Also, put your questions in the Q&A. That's what the Q stands for. Put your comments or links in the chat. In the chat, you'll see links to things like my bio, like panelists' bios. But you also see useful information such as the agenda for the rest of Streaming Media Connect 2024, as well as the agenda for Streaming Media NYC, which is a real in the real world conference here in New York City at the Intercontinental Hotel, May 20th through 22nd. I am hosting, I am curating. I'll be doing a lot of work on panels and in keynotes, but it's going to be a jam-packed 3-day conference with a tremendous amount of great content in it and awesome keynotes and panels. There's going to be a link in the chat to register. There's also going to be a discount code there for passes. And look at the agenda. We are still accepting submissions for panelists and moderators. We have a few seats left, and we're looking to fill out the whole thing before we start announcing. So thanks so much for coming to this panel. I believe that's all the paperwork that we have. Without further ado, I will start. Fast Track Measuring Fast Success in 2024. And I'm going to bring each of our panelists to the stage. They're all going to turn on their cameras all at once. Mike Nagle, GM of Streaming at Gannett and USA Today, one of the earliest fast channels that I can recall. Laura Florence, SVP Global Fast Channels at Fremantle. Patrick Courtney, Head of Streaming Business, SVP and Business Development at Fuse. And Sam Harowitz, Head of Content Acquisitions and Partnerships at one of the biggest fast players out there, Tubi. Thank you all for joining us. Really great panel of people who know this space incredibly well. I'm going to go around rather than try to describe what you do at these places. Sam, what does Head of Content Acquisition and Partnership at Tubi do at this moment? And if you can, on the back end of this, give us your state of the state in as few words as possible about the current world of fast.
Thanks, Evan, and thanks Streaming Media Connect for having me. I'm Sam Harowitz, Head of Content Acquisition and Partnerships at Tubi. What does that mean? I look after all of our third-party relationships with licensors, content partners. My team is responsible for bringing licensed movies, licensed TV series, sports, licensed originals, and fast channels to the service, and ultimately to viewers that come to Tubi looking for a depth and breadth of content offering. I have the luxury of getting to work with great folks from major studios all the way down to indie licensors and everyone and anyone in between. State of the state. You know, some of you may have heard me say this. Laura definitely has, and maybe Patrick on other panels. I'm of a firm belief that we find ourselves at an interesting inflection point in ad-supported video streaming. I didn't coin this, but you know, I'll use this to lead. I think we're at a place where we're at an age of optimization. I think both from fast channels perspective as well as on a VOD side, customers are looking for choice and optionality. And as a service, we're looking to provide that. But we're also looking to solve the paradox of choice. Viewers come to Tubi, they come to other ad-supported streaming services, and they spend an awful lot of time looking for content. We believe the future at Tubi is video on demand. But we also have recognized that audiences are looking for a complementary experience in a lean back fast channel environment. And so as I look to the future, I think you're going to see optimization on the channel offering side. I think you're going to see optimization on the product offering, and so the user experience side. And I think you're also going to see, and I'm starting to see, and I hope you are all as well, an optimization of content coming to fast services across the board. Happy to double click on any one of those.
But
I'll pass it back to you.
In particular, I find it really strange that you continue to be on these fast panels because Tubi is not really a fast service. So one, I'm calling you a fraud right to your face. No, and you've made this point of differentiation many times to me, and I think in other places. But you Tubi started its life as an on-demand platform, right? And really has been, I think, dragging the rest of fast into on-demand reluctantly in many cases because it's a product design challenge for some. But I do think part of the optimization is really leaning heavily into the on-demand habit of consumers, especially in prime time, which is now kind of what they're used to, right?
100%. And I think there is a virtuous cycle between VOD and fast. I hear you. Like we came on the scene 10 years ago as a VOD only service, and really over the last 3 years have built our fast channel offering. Right. I think that is intentional and specific to offer that complementary experience. But I would pose a question to any of my fellow panelists or you, Evan. When you find a show or a movie or a genre or a director or an actor that you love, don't you want to go deep down that rabbit hole? And don't you want to lead your own journey through that content? We can do that for you at Tubi. And you can use fast channels as a discovery mechanism.
And crucially, we've trained the consumer to do this since the box set, of Battlestar Galactica. We've been teaching the consumer to go down that rabbit hole kind of on demand. Then TiVo, and now we've allowed it. Laura, I'm going to turn to you. What is the global head of fast channels mean? A, B, where is your state of the state? And C, are you seeing kind of usage from your standpoint kind of bifurcate into on-demand and linear, and how so? So I gave you a three-parter there.
Yeah, I think my background is I come from aggregation and distribution, specializing in old school retail, right? For Walmart and Costco and Target and all kinds of people, right? We were the aggregator for a shrinking business. So what's old is new again, right? And so moved into distribution, then worked for a platform and started a digital service from scratch. And so as I come into Fremantle, it is a combination of bringing a direct to consumer mindset to what's historically been a production and licensing entity. We own the content worldwide, which makes us unique for this growth period and this new wave of, it's not just fast, right? It's getting the right content to the right platform and the right customer at the right time. So one of those easiest mechanisms though for that delivery is VOD, and then in this scenario, 2 channels, which I'm running for the company. I think for us, what we're looking for though is how do we resolve the old licensing and kind of life cycle methods to maximize the value of our content, because that revenue stream is starting to change and shrink. And we have to start getting creative about how we hyper monetize that optimization point that Sam is on, is 100% right now. How do we do the best job for our content in this space? It might not be just giving away the inventory, right? We have to make sure we're hyper monetizing every point in that supply chain, because these other monetization
so optimization is a part of this, and you're talking about the sellout rate on the channels that you're running when you don't control the sales, and that we're not including Tubi because it always sells out on Tubi.
It does.
But crucially, that's a lost opportunity cost that your company has to start re-examining on a regular basis. So kind of double clicking on Sam's point of optimization here. Now you're also talking for the first time, I think, in Fremantle's existence about kind of managing a whole ad cycle, which is kind of outside of their normal realm of operation.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is you need to be able to really understand the data of how we can optimize versus just what comes kind of in a flat license fee model, right? And I think this is a huge opportunity for someone like Fremantle that has 100 years worth of content. Price is Right has been on for over 50 years. It is a whole new way for us to monetize true IP and brands that have built other brands, right? They're still on air today. So it's been a really interesting strategic journey, because there's a lot of shows that travel, like Baywatch, that's now in 15 plus countries with one single feed. So it becomes very monetizable quickly with little effort outside of obviously how you address all of the dubbing and subbing. But no, and I think that's where too, though, the thing we have to be thoughtful about is fast might not be the end all be all experience, right? Each experience is different. So I think it's really good to understand how your content interacts. Like with Tubi, there's a lift and an optimization with VOD, but Fast delivers entry. It delivers to that discovery
Right,
experience that you might
oftentimes,
need.
just like cable used to. Remember cable?
It's exactly, yes.
It delivers this kind of hook that gets you in, and it becomes a Barker channel for the entire library of content. Oftentimes, I mean, the news product, and I'm
Yeah.
going to transition to Michael here. The news product acts a little differently, though, right? And this is we were talking before and by the way, I'm saving Patrick for last, not because he's best, but because he was late. But he
Wow.
is,
Thanks,
wow.
Evan.
You know, look, we go back. Michael, the news product is a really big growing use case. You know, like you said, you were early day. I said early, you were early days this, but in the prep for this, you said you were one of 3 or 4 outlets for news early days. Now there are hundreds. What are you seeing in news that may be different from the rest of Fast? B, what the hell does the GM of streaming at a news organization like yours do? So that's actually A, and switch it back to B. And then C, what's your state of the state out here in these fast streets?
Sure, I was hoping somebody here could tell me what my job was, but it's a little bit
That
of
would
everything.
be weird.
So everything from growing our distribution to curating our internally produced content to determining what we're lacking, working with external partners to help us in areas that we're lacking some content. And at the same time, we're branded entertainment, even being a news service. Who is USA Today and USA Today Sports? And making sure that the product that we put on the air is a reflection of that, because while we're looking to grow our audience, we're also not looking to disenchant our core followers. And in terms of how news has evolved, well, it's definitely playing for ratings more. I think there's a lot of news outlets out there that are editorializing. They're telling you who to vote for, shouting at each other. That's not our model. Our model is to give our viewers the facts so that they can make informed decisions on election day. Whoever they choose, good, bad, or otherwise, the future will tell. But we're not an infomercial for a party or a candidate or an ideology. What we're looking to be is utility. And if we have our viewers' attention for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 30 minutes, give them something of value with the faith that they're going to come back because they extracted something.
But the interesting thing is news, and again, you were early movers in the space, but news punches way above its weight on Fast. So it's around less than 20% of the channels in Fast are news typically, but they're driving somewhere between 40 and 50% of the usage. Right. So it does seem like news gets a longer length of stay than some of the other categories seems to, a little less shopping and a little bit more destination. Sounds like an Elvis song. And to your point, my sense is while Stir and some of these other, Newsmax are doing okay there, that for the most part, it's this more utilitarian Gannett, USA Today, but also local news, the local ABC affiliate, the local NBC affiliate that people are often checking in with. Am I misjudging that, or is that your read as well?
No, I think you're spot on. We're fortunate that we have multiple newspapers and presences in, just about every state in the country. And a lot of our content, even on our global streaming channel, comes from our team in Indianapolis, our team in Cincinnati. Those stories, while they may be local in origin, they're global in relatability. The infrastructure crumbling, whether it's plumbing or politics or education, and the issues that are plaguing different cities in the country. They're important for us to share because it's today here, but if it's in Cincinnati or it's in New York, that's ultimately going to make its way around the country.
But on the other hand, I mean, from a business standpoint, that reliable source of fact-checked professional news that you offer, that local broadcast affiliates typically are known to offer, that is a utility. And I think one of the reasons why your channels have done well, despite the fact that you're in a huge league now. So you started, there were only you and a couple of other players. Now there are 5, 6, 700 news channels in the US, right?
Yeah.
And so you're one of this huge herd. But I think, the daily utility of it, the portal of the day, something I'm used to checking in. That is something I think a lot of fast channels strive for, but not everybody get. The rabbit hole is one thing, but the fact that I have to touch the product every day is a little bit rarer in fast. And I think it speaks to your success. I give it to you
Yeah,
for
well,
reaction.
I think our props to our journalists and our editorial team. I think the credibility of embedded news and journalists in the markets that gives authenticity and accuracy to the stories that we tell from a very, very unique standpoint, whether it's a documentary we did, Trans in Texas, or the plight of immigration and farming. These stories are being told by people who live in these communities. They're part of these communities. And it's different, I think, if you're telling a story that you've heard or that's bubbling up in the zeitgeist, than if it's something that impacts the community in which you live. And I think that trust that you just articulated well is a big reason why people come to USA Today, because we are America's newspaper or America's news channel or America's news destination.
Well, and that's the thing is you're to Laura's point from earlier, like how are you optimizing, and Sam's point from earlier, not how are you optimizing the name and frankly, goodwill and trust. You mentioned the word community, which I think is going to be increasingly important. And your multi-platform approach to it is, I think, unique, but also a great lesson plan. Patrick, at Fuse, you guys have this weird mishmash of tons of different things, including I get this, cable channel, if I'm not mistaken. Remember those? And then you have this massive, or it seems massive from the outside, digital enterprise in both fast and on pure social video. And then in addition to that, there's this layer of community because you focus on traditionally underrepresented audiences and voices as well. So what do you do as the head of digital and business development? And I think also the coffee there. And secondarily, what's your state of the state in the fast ecosystem, if you can drill to that? And then also, like, where do you see all these things crashing together? I raised that a little earlier. Where do you see fast and cable TV and on demand and AVOD and SVAD and the next acronym? Where I think you sit at an interesting fulcrum point of where you see these things intersecting, both from the consumer standpoint, because you have data around it, and from, a business operations standpoint. So that's a long, complicated question. You have 3 seconds.
Cool. Yeah, and apologies for being
No, I'm
being
kidding.
a little bit
Don't
late.
worry about it.
I blame the time zone. I'm technically on vacation, but there's no place I'd rather virtually be than right here on this panel with you, Evan.
I'm sure
and
your
my
wife
esteemed panelists.
is.
Yeah. I'm Patrick Courtney. I head of digital, and we're working on that. That doesn't really mean anything these days, but we're basically kind of responsible for everything that's not our pay TV network business. So as you mentioned, Evan, Fuse is 20-year-old pay TV media company. We have 2 pay TV networks.
I was there when it was born.
Yeah. It's had a long and rich history, and it continues. And I'll argue that it's still a very good business. Pay TV is still a very good business, and we love it. My bag is our streaming services, our fast channels. We have 5 of them. We have a subscription streaming service, our YouTube, our social media. So I'm responsible for all of that, and then anything that's new. So we played around in Web3. To your point about the community aspect, we're really focused on what community means, how you build a brand around community these days, because big brands tend to be getting smaller and not bigger. And so that's something that we're thinking a lot about, how that connects to fast, whether it does or not. And the way that I come at it with fast is thinking about it in terms of like in the context of the overall entertainment ecosystem, where does it sit? And so from my standpoint is I think we're still in much more of like an identity phase of fast. Like, where does it ultimately sit in all of this? Like what is the end need state for the average viewer for fast? How does a viewer move across different environments? To your point, you mentioned like 6 or 7 different acronyms about it. Right now, we're still very fragmented, very disconnected. the idea that a television is a giant iPhone is just a clunky experience. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to create something that feels like a holistic entertainment experiences. And for us with Fuse, given that we have different types of products, we think a lot about like, where is that convergence going to happen? And then how do we move our content across those different ecosystems to make sure that, one, the monetization is there and is appropriate for what that, you know, what that that relationship is with the viewer and what they're investing in.
And how much of your time is spent on FAST versus the other areas of digital distribution that your team works on?
You know, like this is like this era, which is just adapt or die. You kind of go where the energy is moving and where the momentum is, and where is that traction. I think FAST is kind of like really, since, you know, basically since the pandemic, has sort of just been on this, as you know, we've talked about, this kind of extreme growth phase. And so we've really leaned into FAST. We've seen a lot of our advertising demand. Given that we're a 20-year-old pay TV network, we have a very strong linear sales team. They're seeing a lot more connected TV ad demand. So our ad dollars are moving into connected TV. So we follow the money. We invest in it, and we invest in connected TV. We invest in FAST. We're building our FAST channel business. We're building our owned and operated FAST channel business. We're also building an advertising solution within the FAST business that we'll have a little bit more information about in the next couple of weeks. So we're definitely focused on FAST, but that's not to say that we're not focused on subscription, or that we're not focused on pay TV cable, or that we're not focused on, you know, social video and YouTube. There is, you know, to be a modern media company, you have to kind of have a presence across all of that.
Right. So you know, in your portfolio and in Michael's and in Laura's and at Sam's larger company, FAST, AVOD, whatever you want to call it, is a part of a portfolio. It's part of a suite of services. And in particular, when you're talking to advertisers, you're offering all of them usually. I mean, I imagine the number of deals that bundle Tubi and the NFL on Fox together are substantial, right? So, but in the context of all of that, and in the context of paradox of choice, and in the context of Sam's framing of this panel, thanks. In post, I'll take credit for that. Around optimization, what do these two massive stories this week in the FAST ecosystem say? Walmart's buying Vizio, which has been a major and early mover in FAST, and Freevee, which news broke during our prep today. Freevee folding into Prime, which is actually, if you've ever read my stuff, I've been pushing for Freevee and Prime to come together, and Pluto and Paramount Plus to come together to simplify the lives of the consumers at the end of the day. Patrick, you mentioned about creating a better experience there. Sam, you talked about optimization. Laura, you talked about maximizing revenue across all these things. What do those two big stories tell us about where we are right now and what the whole ecosystem should be thinking about next? I throw it open. Whoever wants to jump in, jump ball. Sam said, I think Sam was off mute first. Go ahead, Sam.
I think the interesting thing about both of those stories for me is that it demonstrates a shift and an addressable audience that is clearly yearning for a more comprehensive experience, right? I think all of us have said that in a slightly different way. But I think, you know, that coupled with Amazon's move into ad-supported subscription video will ultimately drive this is my personal prognostication, a continued acceleration of shifting the ad dollars from traditional ways of reaching customers, viewers, to streaming video. And I have to believe a rising tide will lift all ships. It will benefit the Tubis, the Plutos, the FAST channels that Michael and Laura and Patrick distribute to multiple endpoints, the Rokus of the world, and in turn give advertisers different and more dynamic ways to reach the viewers and addressable audiences they're looking for. How does it affect me and impact what I do at Tubi? I think most notably, it'll allow us to reach deeper into catalogs with partners and access better, more premium content. It'll also cause distributors to think about how they window content differently. Laura kind of touched on this previously, which is at Tubi, we have over 455 content partners that bring 240,000 hours of movies and TV series to the service. And what we've been thinking about over the last 6 months is, what is the optimal content mix? Where are we seeing the highest level of engagement? And we've started to experiment with new content types and new content categories. And so I'm really excited about that.
What are you measuring when you measure engagement? What do you mean? Do you mean length of visit or the completion rate
We
on
look,
a
listen,
piece of
we
content?
look at a number of data points internally, and they vary from session viewing time to habitual behavior, how often someone's going back to the platform. I'm not going to break news here on what our North Star of what the
Ad impressions served, maybe?
I mean, listen, as a partner of Tubi, if you come and do a rev share deal with us, we do offer quite a depth and breadth of data points to you in real time. Laura and Michael can attest to this. On the Tubi platform, you have access to real-time information that does include things like impressions and eCPMs. Ultimately, we believe that transparency with the content provider who is taking a risk in availing their content will benefit both them, the platform, and the consumer when they think about coming to Tubi and engaging with content. But I'd be curious to hear what Laura, Michael, and Patrick think is the most important or paramount data point in tracking engagement or viewership.
Yeah,
because they're on the other side of it.
Yeah, that is, as an IP owner, Laura, what's your take on how do you measure success?
I think that's where, in this age of optimization theme we're going to run with, right? We as a partner can be the biggest advocate and the best advocate for our properties, right? We've been speaking to the Price is Right customer for 50 years. And so that's where, when we're given the tools to understand if the methods that we're using, the hundreds of millions of Facebook impressions that we can do for free, right? Just with a post. There's also targeted marketing things we can do with a spend. I think my head of marketing was on here from my last gig. There was a whole process that we could do where we were a true strategic partner with the platform because we drove value that we could see in real time. So with Sam, I can actually track the marketing spend in real time with the spend happening on Facebook, driving into Tubi, and I can make sure my ROI is positive. I'm maximizing that. I know they're going to sell out ads. So that is actually a model for success for us in that optimization model that we can control. And we can do it the best because we know the IP, we make it. And I think that's where there's multiple different ways we can start to enhance that with QR code integration with first-party apps that we can actually put a game in, right? For all of our gamification content. So just sticking with that theme, I think the data helps us be better to help both parties maximize. So that's what we're really.
You've mentioned data a couple of times now, and I do think, Patrick or Mike take this. I do think the improvements that are necessary for the ecosystem around discovery and usability and navigability and personalization, which I think is going to become increasingly important. Think about the amount of data that Amazon has about the freebie user and the Prime user, which is another reason to meld them together. Think about how much data Walmart has about the Vizio owner, especially because they kind of control the whole food chain now. To a certain extent, I think there's going to, in order for everybody who isn't Amazon, Walmart, Google, or Meta to succeed, I think there's going to have to be a commingling or better sharing of data across the entire ecosystem amongst all the players, the IP owners and the platform. Because Roku is big, but compared to Amazon, that's a hard fight to fight from just a pure data standpoint. Michael, Patrick, either one of you have a take on that?
Well, I think the big word for what happened with Vizio is it's shortening the runway. I mean, the goal is to get advertising to a channel sooner and monetize that to the advertiser faster. They just eliminated a step on that ladder and accelerated the turnaround of revenue and the exchange of revenue. And Amazon, exact same thing. I think for us, the number one analytic that we look at as a decision maker is viewership. We're in the content business. So whether the content is watched, listened to, read, downloaded, or consumed in any fashion is an indication to us that we're doing something right. Hopefully that always translates into sponsorship dollars because that shows that what we're doing is attracting an audience. There are a lot of ways to attract an audience. For news brands, that can be a complicated road because what are you playing for? Are you playing for accuracy? Or are you playing to an audience? So we have to straddle that fence a little bit more delicately, I think, than a pure entertainment brand. But number one, we always look to what is our audience, how is the audience responding to the content that we're outputting? And then next is, okay, is it profitable? Can we sustain that business and continue to grow as a brand?
Yeah, and I think everybody, especially IP owners like USA Today, have to really understand what the brand glow or brand damage might be in a fast environment, and that is a consideration set, especially with things, and this is one of the big conundrums, like over frequency of ads, and all the other kind of issues around one's own channel environment, right? Because I don't know how much percentage of your inventory you were selling, but on certain platforms, I'm imagining you're not selling a good deal of it, right? And so,
Or even under frequency of ads. I mean,
right. Well, there's the other thing. How many of us have seen that kind of fish swimming in a glass thing, or his moment of zen, or whatever it is? So, Patrick, I'll turn to you. Whether it's the sellout rate or the over frequency or any of the other kind of colliding elements of this, the answer is going to wind up being data, right? The more we can drill into the data and use the anonymized, privacy protected, unique identity of each user, the better that environment's going to be for each user. The question is, how do we pull everybody together to get the data that makes that necessary? If you're not Google, if you're not Amazon,
I don't know. I don't know how you pull it together. I mean, like we talked about this. Like it creates there has to be some sort of forcing function, and maybe things like Walmart's acquisition of Vizio is part of that creates this need to standardize measurement across platforms. I mean, we do. It's not like it's like completely void of.
Interoperability. That's
Yeah, it's not completely void of data. It's just that the data that you get is different across platforms, and
your enterprise actually it kind of personifies the need. So the JIC put out, here's a really good comparison, by the way. So in the United States, we had Nielsen, which was a monopoly for many, many years. And then they fell out of favor. And now we have a JIC that's allowing for basically a multi-pronged currency and measurement ecosystem. In the UK, the JIC is owned by all the stakeholders, and there's one unit of measurement, basically, and it compares all of the platforms side by side, Netflix and broadcast, soon to be YouTube, I hope. We don't have anything close to that here, and we keep grappling with the conversation. But what do you do? Like, just across, how do you sell interoperably? You have TV, digital, all these other platforms. I'm sure you're selling across those platforms. Are the buyers buying that way?
Some are, some aren't. You kind of have to, again, sort of adapt and those buyers, be their brands or agencies, are also evolving. There used to be a very, a separation between digital media and TV, and now they're just sort of video investment teams, and they're buying across social, YouTube, connected TV, pay TV, linear, but not everybody buys that way. So you kind of have to, it's a difficult challenge that I'm not envious of our sales team and our integrated marketing teams to figure out, all right, how do we take this sort of a package to advertisers A, B, C, D, and then a different one to different buyers who are buying in a different way. And I think that's something that is kind of just, table stakes now is to understand how you do that. But I think the way for us, given the fact that Fuse is a diverse owned media company and we reach a multicultural audience, that's kind of how we sell, is we sell that we reach a certain segment of audiences across platforms, and we sell that contextually against premium long form content for the most part. And that is a really strong sell, and that gives us the kind of the value proposition to our advertising partners to spend with us. And I think that creates, the way that we can sell is different than the way, let's say, a Tubi might sell or a Samsung TV Plus might sell. And I think that if by creating a collaborative ecosystem in which all of the data is shared, that actually creates a more healthy advertising ecosystem for everybody.
Well, also, so think about it from the consumer standpoint. I think, the consumer, I think Sam mentioned the paradox of choice earlier on the panel, which is this: it's not getting better, it's getting worse.
Yeah.
And if you look at what people are watching and listening to right now, it's really leaning on known brands. I think in part because discovering new work is very difficult.
Yeah.
The data allows for discovery. It allows for a more personalized experience. It takes the preferences that you might have when you're on the Fuse platform and imports them to Tubi when you get there, and introduces you to content on that platform. That's one aspect of it. But I also think it helps get the buyers, and there is, as much money is moving to CTV as has been and will in this new front and upfront, it's not moving commensurate with the amount of usage.
Yeah.
And part of that's because it's really a fucking hard to buy, to be blunt. You know, and to a certain extent, I think data is either it is the answer specifically, technically, because it can actually fix it, or it leads us to the insights to know how to fix it. But to Patrick's last point, if the rest of the ecosystem that isn't a trillion-dollar Death Star doesn't get together and share data and really pool its resources more, and I can point to, there are good examples out there, you know, to point to. It is going to be increasingly hard to compete with, you know, the other thing that ties those two stories together. They're both huge retailers who are suddenly now television companies.
Yeah.
And that's the ecosystem that we now live in. Laura, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is where, you know, I also run a broadcast channel that we sell 100% of the inventory that is literally just run off Nielsen ratings, right? And they're 0.01% of the market. And having come from a platform, I know I can provide addressable, real-time data that makes a meaningful ROI for an advertiser. And that's where I need that benchmark that advertisers can agree on, because they're going to know that our IP is IP that is a lean in active watch scenario, right? It's family friendly. Like, these are the things that are going to help them discover that this is worth taking the effort on. And so I can only do that in pieces right now, right? And it's not being done at the value the content is actually worth. So for us, just to re-echo everything you're saying, we need that normalization, because we can't make this content and we cannot keep it going if it's a fraction of the actual value it's actually worth to an advertiser. Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing is, I think in both cases, so Amazon did $48 billion in retail media advertising sales last year. Walmart did about 4 billion. If you read Trade Desk's report on retail media, they report that they think by the end of this decade, retail media on television is going to be a $6 billion market, right? So the nature of the whole ecosystem is shifting. And I do think if we can, if we as a collective can look at what this screen is actually becoming, we can predict where we need to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But it is, I think, the independents versus the big tech who have to start really kind of coming together to figure this stuff out. I think Sam, Mike, you know, Patrick, Laura, for all of you, in each one of your cases, you have a suite of services. None of you are only FAST. You know, Sam, you work on FAST, but your company is, you know, one of the biggest broadcasters in the world, right? I think I did a count using Video Amp data recently. I can't remember, but I think you had a huge percentage of the most watched television last year, especially because of the NFL. I doubt very much that your ad sales team or your affiliate team sells them, you know, kind of independently. Is the bundling of audiences like that, and this applies to each one of you, table stakes now? Can you be, you know, an independent channel that only exists on YouTube and FAST and really compete for ad dollars? Forget the eyeballs part of it. Can you really go out there and compete in the marketplace? Or is table stakes for FAST to be a part of a larger ecosystem so that you can cross sell? Mike, I'll throw that to you if
I think cross-selling's a challenge, and I think Laura and Sam both alluded to this earlier. The need for uniform analytics in the industry is of paramount importance, because I can remember years ago speaking to FCC regulators, and I would ask them where they lived. They'd tell me the city, and I could tell them the cable provider that they had at home, and they'd say, "How did you know that?" Well, it was easy because it was either cable or satellite at the time. The big issue that is plaguing advertising in the streaming ecosystem right now is the advertisers don't know what they're buying and what the possible benefit or detriment is. So if they're confused by it, the only reason they're buying it is because basic cable and broadcast has shrunk. It's
Yeah, right.
contracted.
And it's,
Broadcast
and
is
it's, and it's
growing
shrinking
again.
ever faster every day. Yeah.
Exactly. So one is growing, they're buying it, but they don't know what to expect. So unless as an industry, we can gather and decide what are the key measurement analytics, it's going to plague every aspect, including premium, because fast is the appetizer. It's that tiny piece of cheesecake. I'm borrowing from Laura's playbook since she was in Costco. It's that tiny piece of cheesecake so that when you leave the store, you take home that railroad flat size bucket of it. No one goes to Costco to eat lunch, but they have an awful lot of samplers before they leave, having spent $400 or $500. So we need uniformity. We need concession. And I think forming an agnostic committee to build out the analytics that everyone can agree on, dare to dream, is the ideal for effective monetization.
I'm going to jump into the comments and questions here, and this is a reminder for everybody to drop questions in, and I'll be asking them all along. Michael Dem talks about the traditional cable and telcos and live OTT are dealing with a ton of different technical challenges now, because you now have many different apps for many different platforms, or on the other end of things, the costs of running fast channels, while not huge, if you're if you're generating a tremendous amount of revenue, it's the service isn't necessarily always what you're paying for, to be blunt. And so, I think the build or buy strategy is part of the kind of conundrum that operators like all y'all have right now. What are you finding from a tech stack challenge standpoint, as much as you guys are involved in this? And I know you are, because to a certain extent, metadata, all the other, kind of stacking capabilities that you have to do, and then dealing with the play out partners that you have to deal with. I'm just curious as to what you're finding, how the tech stack looks to you at this interesting maturation date for FAST and AVOD. I'll throw it to anyone who wants to take that.
Sam, I was going to say, I can see you, so I don't know if you have something I can lead off of.
I was going to speak more to the point that you made, Evan, about the associated cost, CapEx and OpEx costs in launching a channel, right? Give shout out where shout out is deserved. Gavin Bridge tracks really, really closely the number of fast channels available in, let's call it North America or the US. I think it's currently
2000.
benchmarked at around 1900. Is that right?
It's like just under 2000. Yeah.
I'm going to be a dissenting voice here and say I do not think this ecosystem can support that many channels at an effective rate of monetization.
You're answering a question that was literally just posted in the Q&A.
There you go.
Ahead, yes.
Leading the witness. So I think.
So part of the optimization is reducing the clutter of channels.
Yeah, I think that we are at a stage now where you need to look in the mirror as a licensor and understand what the catalog you have and how it could be appropriately monetized and how you can drive viewership. 5 years ago, when fast channels were just starting to ramp, anybody with about 100 hours could throw up a channel and see really good engagement and decent monetization. It was the last stop on the wheel of value from a windowing perspective. For some of you on the panel and others in the room, you might know, I come from the sales side. So I helped to launch some of the first fast channels that A&E went out to market with. And at that time, Laura wasn't at Fremantle, but Fremantle was considering and effectively rolling out fast channels with their library of catalog. And I think you fast forward to where we are in 2024, you have major studios entering the marketplace with fast channels, with brands that are really meaningful on a D2C basis, right? Like Michael was talking about before with the news piece of our business. Consumers respond to IP and brands that they're familiar with, and that helps to circumvent that paradox of choice that Evan, you were talking about before. I think ultimately we're going to get to a place where we're going to start to see sunsetting of quite a large swath of fast channels. So my advice to anyone who is currently contemplating launching a fast channel is really think about that audience you're trying to reach. Think about how you're going to find them, how you're going to engage them, and what your programming strategy to continue to bring them back on a daily or weekly basis is. Because throwing up 100 hours and just letting it run no longer works.
Yeah, I
from
know.
my perspective.
I talked to a lot of people who are thinking about launching fast channels. I've talked to you about maybe one or two of them. And 100 I tried to convince to not launch a fast channel. It is it's like yeah, there's opportunity here, but it's capped to a certain extent. And the idea that you're going to take it away from, Disco Brothers or Paramount or Disney is an interesting, an interesting perspective, one channel. So I think you're right. There's going to be an absolute culling of the herd of fast channels out there. And the question is, what's going to get through the other side? What is the measure of success for a successful fast channel? Because it is a bit of a, I think, Laura, you said this, there's a bit of an 80-20 rule here, right? So the most powerful channels sop up most of the usage in this
Yeah.
ecosystem, and a ton of channels get like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So, what is going to be the determinant of those channels? You run a slate of channels. Patrick, you work on a bunch of different stuff. What do you think? And Sam, you see it all. What do you think is going to be the thing that gets you over the transom versus the thing that leaves you in the net?
Yeah, I think got to think about what is it that a customer wants to watch first and foremost, right? What's the customer experience? And then how are they going to discover it? And then how are you going to be accountable for driving that? Like, this isn't a one-stop shop where we give all effort to the platform to do all the work. Like, it's the brands that are going to meet at the top of that funnel, and we're going to work together to get customers in, to get them back. And so I think that's where, because that is the excellence point of creating the content, because the supply chain is really like diminished, we're going to be that point of excellence now with the platform directly, and we have to be. The one thing I will say to answer Michael's question on the technical delivery real quick before I forget, each platform, having built this from scratch and now having to dealt with every single play
I thought
out,
you might have a point of view on that.
yeah, honestly, I think this is where what we saw is there's so much complexity with an ad server that if you don't have everything lined up, if you have a variable ad load versus a fixed ad load, if you're not sending the right metadata, to your point, Evan, if they're doing SSAI and it's not well connected with their actual engineering build, there's 1,000 ways to fail, right? And so monitoring, again, with the limited amount of data we get on this side versus what I used to get on the platform, we can't be a proactive partner in addressing those failure points, right? So it's almost better for us to get the inventory and just manage it ourselves, because we can at least make sure we're monetizing and playing back hours. So I think you have to be really careful.
How much of your stack is internal there versus what you outsource? Just as a percentage standpoint, do you think?
So with my previous job, right, we did everything in-house, right? Except for the players that would not let us participate. So we actually knew the true value of inventory right in the model. At Fremantle, it's different because we started with more rev share and licensing models and some inventory models, but with Buzzer, we sell it at 100%. So that's something that I'm pushing for inventory because I know that I can monetize it the best because I'm selling Family Feud at broadcast. I can bring that revenue all the way downstream, right?
Exactly. And that's my point about the bundling there. That's exactly, I think, a great case study for it. I think what a lot of these moves demonstrate is like it's the power in having many access points to consumers, data, and for advertisers is going to be a huge advantage.
But you have to think of these as long-term brands, right? Like, this is not something you can just step a foot in unless you're just, doing an 18-month pop-up for a new show that's coming out as, that's fine. That's still a tactic. It's just, this needs to be a strategy you invest in because there's cost and there's people and there's time.
Okay. So let me twist this around for a second. So what is it that we as a group can do for advertisers to make them feel more comfortable to put higher CPM, more, television scale, budgets together, not only treat it for, because I think programmatic and addressable, these are all really incredibly important, but doing, bigger kind of upfront commitments for these ecosystems is going to be also important about growing the ARPU for all of these channels. So what can the ecosystem do better to bring more dollars in than it has been in each upfront?
We were talking to Patrick and I are actually just talking about this. I don't know where the thumbs up came from.
Yeah.
Was,
feature.
In the traditional models, again, what's old is new, right? Which is sponsorships, embedding content uniquely into the brand, right? Like, that's not something a platform can do with our content if I'm playing out the channel. And we can share in that revenue. I share it on the broadcast side. But I think we come from this mindset that the platform has to sell everything, and that's not accurate. Like, we have the broadcast capabilities to do this best job. Let us be your partner in it. It's just everyone wins in that. It's just getting the partner to release in that. But there's specialty teams you need to do some of this too, right? You need a
Right.
sponsorship team. You need regional groups on the ground.
Well,
It-
and
it- it's
Roku
good.
bought a sponsor, they bought a branded content team.
Yeah.
The question is, Patrick, you're in this space a lot, and I think you talk to a lot of folks in the ISA. Is anybody else here in the ISA, the Independent Streaming Association, I think? What do you do if you don't have all those capabilities? Like you have a bunch of IP, so you have hundreds and hundreds of hours, maybe thousands of hours of IP, but you don't have an ad sales acumen. You don't have this infrastructure. What is an IP holder to do with this? What would you advise them to do?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I don't know. I think it's hard to answer that in a sort of like a one size fits all type of response. I think that's one of the challenges for folks with like really strong IP, but without the ability to sell the advertising, is that a lot of the platforms aren't doing a great job of that either. And so there's a lot of folks feeling very underwhelmed with the monetization of their content in fast environments. And so but what they turn to is open place programmatic, which also has its risks. And there's all kinds of reasons why that creates an ecosystem that doesn't stand up. It's not sustainable. And you see CPMs just sort of like, dropping. And I think finding other ways to better support that sales effort, while either partnering with companies that have strong sales teams, or ultimately, who knows, but like going back to a licensing model, maybe the content library is not fit for a 24/7 fast channel. You license it to other multi-content fast channels that can do the TV thing and know how to sell that and know how to stunt it, know how to bring all of that together to really create a monetization opportunity that makes sense for the value of the content itself. And I'm saying like that's one alternative. There's different ways to do this, but I think that is one point that I think a lot of folks, programmers, are having trouble with, is that they've got very strong IP and they're making pennies on the dollar for it. It's not sustainable for the programmer, and ultimately it's not that great of a user experience because you've got these empty ad pods, you've got the over frequency issues, you've got just like a not very good ad experience against that premium content. And so that's where I think we are in an age of optimization in a lot of different areas. I think from the advertising standpoint, we are far from an optimization standpoint.
So I'm going to take this back to Sam, who is a content acquirer. And I don't want you to go into any of your business practices that you can't share. But do you see the ecosystem with the major platforms, the major collaborators, like yourself and some of the others, shifting, some of the model more towards a licensing model, especially as bigger studios come into the play? Do you see an ecosystem just from an optimization standpoint for a second? Because the accounting of it all gets a lot easier, right? And you know your opportunity costs and you know which channels to focus on. Do you see the ecosystem where the major platforms are going to lean a little bit more into kind of traditional licensing deals versus, rev share deals?
Well, I think that's a two-pronged question. First being, are we active in the traditional licensing space? The answer is yes, right? A lot of those
You more so than I think a lot of other folks in the ecosystem.
Yeah, and not to toot our own horn, but I think at a time where the content market was white hot coming out of the pandemic, we were quite disciplined about the bets that we took, and we were able to be at the right time in the right place to capitalize on opportunities with, again, major studios and independent licensors when they came to market after 2 years of high license fees being paid by some of our competitive services, and then couldn't move stuff. And so we saw an opportunity to step in and sort of right size or recalibrate the market expectations. You don't have to go far to see that we've done some deals with Warner Brothers Discovery on DC movies. We've done deals with the likes of Disney and NBCU for legacy or nostalgia TV shows like Scandal. We've moved into the original programming space. The last 2 months, we've announced 2 shows that we bought coming out of the UK, one in Borders, which is a show created for BBC 3, and the other Dead Hot, She's actually premiering on Amazon Prime Video. So for us, we are pretty active in that licensing, that fixed fee licensing space, and we'll continue to do so to ensure that we're bringing variety and breadth
Well,
of
it just
content
gives
to
you
our
a much
viewers.
more predictable set of outcomes, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
helps you optimize. I mean, not every channel needs to be that way. There are plenty of people, I'm sure the Baywatch channel is probably thrilled to do a rev share.
But so that's the second prong, or the second piece of the question, which is, you know, we are not here to limit the upside of our partners. We believe that success on Tubi is a success for our licensing partners. So when Laura and her team bring opportunities to us, we want to ensure that they can continue to capitalize on the runaway success of a fast channel or a series that they might be bringing to AVOD for the first time. So, you know, it's a bespoke case-by-case analysis. You're not going to see us take our foot off the gas pedal as it relates to fixed fee licensing. But we're also going to continue to build that library of, you know, real volume, and continue to roll out these, as we call them, rabbit holes that viewers can dive into. You can't do that without creating what I would say is like head, shoulder, and tail programming. And every type of content sits at a different place in that
I think
that
crucially
journey
too,
of a
it's
viewer.
gonna matter that the experience is premium from start to finish. Fast needs to be a premium experience. It can't be another version of YouTube, because it will lose that battle by a lot. Really quickly, with the 2 minutes we have left, you know, so we're sliding in between a model a digital model that looks a little like cable television, to a television company being owned by Walmart. If you could describe in, you know, 10 words or less where television ends up at the end of this decade, is it more like a new version of the traditional model? Or is it going to be something completely different from where it is today? Fast, you know, placing it, you know, irregardless. What are you seeing out there? Michael, what are your thoughts?
I think you have to be nimble, because making your content available in any format the user is willing to consume it in any quantity, is of paramount importance for both sustainability of the brand and also monetization of the content.
Laura?
One, I want to thank, I know this isn't quite what you wanted to end it on, but these are the type of conversations I think that are going to help push us forward.
Yeah,
this
we had
is a
140
unified
people here for the whole panel too, by the way. So thank you to
Yeah,
everybody.
I think we're all experiencing a lot of the same things, right? And I think we can help drive the quickness and the speed we need to see, especially, again, you talk about YouTube a lot in some of your last panels and things. So I want to just thank everybody for taking the time to keep pushing it forward, because it is going to be a bunch of us coming together, I think, to like do the right things for the content and get the market back to where it needs to be. So it was more of just super glad to be here. This was really exciting.
Well, thanks for
fun.
joining it. Yeah, it was a great conversation. Patrick, any last thoughts from you before we head out?
Yeah, I think it's a great conversation. It's, you know, it's why I'm here on vacation, because it's very important that we talk about these things. I would just say, I think 10 years, I hope to see, call it convergence, call it unification, but the getting away from, I mean, just again, back to when you just rattled off a dozen different acronyms, like we are just in this mess of a space. And the more that this stuff starts to come together and feel like a cohesive ecosystem, the better off everybody's going to be.
Great. Sam, I'll give you the last word before I sign off.
So I'm gonna steal an analogy you used on a prep call, Evan, is that, you know, it's only been 2 weeks since the Super Bowl, but I'm yearning for some more football analogies. If the AVOD space is a football game, we're not even at halftime yet. And
I agree.
And I think that, you know, I've said it already on this call. We believe at Tubi that the fourth quarter will end with a ad-supported on-demand experience winning the day, because we want to deliver to viewers what they want, where they want, how they want it, and when they want it. And so I think that the experience that you'll see continue to push the envelope is a mixture of VOD with complementary fast. And my party notice, you know, not new or controversial, but AVOD is the same candy wrapper as cable television, and the same candy bar in a new wrapper. So I think you'll see evolution and change, but we got 2 more solid quarters to go, and I'm excited to be part of it as I
Well, I want to thank you all. This was a great conversation. You guys really know this space as well as anybody out there. So thank you all for joining. Thanks for the time. I'd like to thank the world for giving us two great stories to join the conversation happening within minutes of our panel. So that was awesome. Thank you all for sticking around. There's a tremendous amount of really great content today and tomorrow at Streaming Media Connect. Steve will put it in the chat. Our winner of this Name the Song and Band contest was Dan Prescott. It was Maceo and the Max, Soul Power 74. Look for all the panels and other stuff from Streaming Media Connect on their YouTube page. That link will also be around here somewhere. Thank you very much for to our panelists. This was a great conversation. I barely noticed that the hour passed by. And I'll see you in a little while, everybody.